Here we go. Going live. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this afternoon's conversation with Tim Watts. For those of you who have joined to see Ian Livingstone, terribly sorry. We couldn't get Ian on this afternoon, so you got absolute the very next best choice. And thanks for Tim for jumping in at such late stage to help us out here. For those who don't know Tim, he's the federal member for Gellibrand, which takes in the inner western suburbs of Melbourne, and he's also the Shadow Assistant Minister for Communications and Cybersecurity. Most of you probably know Tim from his recent Twitch appearance where he and Claire O'Neill played Moving Out together from Parliament House. He's currently in quarantine in Canberra, so we can ensure he represents us all, or at least the people from his Gellibrand next week in Parliament. Roger Clarke is with us. Roger's the Managing Director of Koch Media and a long-time industry veteran, in spite of how young he looks, and an IGEA board member. So what we'd like to do in this session is facilitate a bit of a conversation between Roger and Tim, but at the same time, we're actually live, surprised, the only live event at GCAP, and we'll be running through a chat. So we'll be answering some questions as they come up. So what I might do is just get Tim, then Roger to do a bit of a quick introduction, and then we might just jump into the questions and some chat. So over to you, Tim.
Oh, thanks, Ron. Good to be with you here today. It's not like I have anything better to do from hotel quarantine, so glad to sort of spend the time with you. Yeah, I don't really have anything to add to your introduction to me, other than to say that I'm principally here as a gamer myself. I mean, I'm a proud geek, worked in tech for 10 years before I got into Parliament. So I've been playing games my whole life. I'm sort of like that generation where I was able to literally grow up with it. So yeah, I mean, I kind of, that's a big part of my identity as an MP, is wanting to sort of normalise that in the building and make sure that the industry gets the recognition it deserves. So I'm, more power to your cause at the IGA. I'm always happy to help out.
Cool. And Roger.
Thank you, Ron. Also great to be here. I'm here today not really as MD of Koch, the publishing company that I look after for Australia and New Zealand, but really as an IGEA board member, just to throw some questions to Tim and to hear his thoughts and his opinions on a range of issues that I think will be interesting both for the audience and then kind of more broadly from the point of view of gamers generally. So I guess the first question I've got, if I may, Tim, is what's your poison of choice, your preferred gaming platform?
Well, I grew up as a PC gamer really early on, so I didn't really get into the consoles until around high school. But now that I have an adult job, I can afford to spread my love across all the consoles. So I actually play on Xbox, PlayStation, and Switch. So a 3-console gamer. But I don't PC game anymore. It's just too expensive, too scary for me just at the minute. Maybe later in life I'll get back into it, but I'm very happy with the consoles at the moment.
As you circle back in. So is that a controller? I can see behind you there.
Yeah, that's the Xbox. I did put it in the boot of the car with me for this period of lockdown. So I am doing real work during the budget and Zooming in and, appearing at all kinds of conferences. But yes, 2 weeks away from home, away from the family's freed up a little bit more gaming time than I usually would have. So that's nice.
That's great. And can I guess, a silver lining of 14 days in a hotel room in Canberra, which is probably not at the top of the list for many people, I would guess. So in terms of that time, what games are you filling your time with at the moment?
So I'm also a big basketball fan, so playing a bit of 2K at the moment because it's NBA finals time. So always really like that. I've been playing back through some old games, sort of making sure that I've completed everything. So I finished Red Dead Redemption a while back, but now I'm sort of going through trying to get all those bloody animals and all the different worlds. I went through a bit of a Bethesda phase. So I thought, now I've got time for Skyrim. I've never done it before. I'm not an RPG really. I said, missed that boat, so I'm going to have it a crack. I couldn't do it though. It's just a little bit too geeky for me. So then I went the whole reverse other way, and got back into Doom Eternal and finished that off. And that was a real throwback to, playing the original Doom on PC. I can remember having the shareware version of that. So that was a nice throwback to youth.
So it's time well spent in Canberra then. Budget, Zoom calls plus Doom. That's fantastic.
It's probably not great for the mindset, in a hotel room on your own in Canberra. As you say, it's not really the most life-affirming place to be. So,
and just shifting gears to your, I guess, history around PC gaming. Favorite game ever?
Oh, Civilization.
Ah,
yeah, easy.
Sid Meier fan.
Sid Meier's, absolutely. I guess probably my favourite was Civ 2. I mean, I played so much of the original Civ that it's not funny, just lost school holidays to it, and etc. Always liked it more than the sort of Sim Cities, Age of Empires. Like Civilization was a sweet spot, and Civ 2 was kind of when it was just complicated enough to be, really engaging. But the later editions, it's like you need to really commit your life to it. And, I try, but it's just that little bit too complicated for me these days. I don't quite have the bandwidth.
Was that your drive into politics, Tim? This world domination?
I tell you, there's so many MPs in Parliament that grew up on Civilization. Like Peter Khalil, the number of times that he's lectured me, he's very proud of his Egyptian heritage, Peter, and he's a Ramesses man in Civilization, which kind of fits his personality pretty well, I reckon.
So when you are all there in Parliament House, is there a secret room somewhere where you've got servers set up? There's, a whole LAN party thing going on behind closed doors. How does that work?
Well, I was saying to Ron actually that, so Claire O'Neill and I did our Twitch stream playing SMG's Moving Out. God, I've lost all concept of time a month or so ago. Setting that up, getting the broadcast right, I was saying around it reminded me of LAN parties I had when I was a teenager. But, back in those days, you had to sort of put the CRT screen on the handlebars of the bike and the tower, and you'd sort of go over to your mate's face and sort of directly connect in. And so it's better than that now. I don't know, I reckon if you did a survey of the officers at Parliament House, you might be surprised by how many consoles you came across. There'd be more than a few, I'd say.
Right. So it's refreshing, though, that you're a politician who actually puts his hand up and says, I love to play games. So those hidden consoles are sat elsewhere. So what do you think? I mean, we've just had the budget obviously announced, and one of the things that we saw was that gaming was not something that was considered for a tax break for development purposes. Where are you at on that? What's your position around where we sit as an industry, some of the challenges we have with regard to perhaps perception in Canberra? Where do you think we're at?
Yeah, I mean, look, from my personal view is I don't think video games should be considered any different to any other kind of creative industry. But you're right, there is some kind of a sort of not a stigma, but it's sort of maybe viewed as frivolous or trivial. But I really can't see why that would be any more so than any other genre, than television production or film production. Particularly when you sort of really engage with particularly some of the Australian games recently, I think have had that real emotional core that's quite impactful. Like you think of a game like Florence, really not sort of graphics heavy and complicated, etc. But tells a really charming, emotionally packed story. It's great. I've been playing that projection game, First Light game recently, like the Shadows game. It's sort of Wayang shadow puppetry, and it's sort of like a problem solving thing with, and there's real cultural weight to that game. I think like developed by two Aussies, and I don't see there's any reason that you'd view the industry as different from film and TV. The reality of it is when you look at the sort of profile of gamers, the average age is about 34, which is not that younger than me. We're getting closer to half of gamers being women. And the reality is that by revenue, you can count it in different ways, but it's pretty confidently we can say that that Australians spend more on games as a creative industry than any other creative industry. So I just don't see any reason that it should be treated differently. The reality, though, is that it is. We saw that on budget night. That there's a range of, tax advantages and direct funding mechanisms for other creative industry forms that just aren't available to the video game industry. We've sort of traditionally viewed that a bit differently in the Labor Party. We sadly haven't been in government for a very long time, but we've sort of supported that interactive games fund model for a long time. I think it was about 25 million was the commitment at the last election on that. But yeah, just long term, the reason that I'm so open about being a gamer is that I really want to normalise the industry in Parliament House. I want to sort of change the perception so that people aren't, hiding the console in the office, and a little bit more open that this is a recreational activity that, what is it, 9 out of 10, Ron? Give me the stat, 9 out of 10 Australians participating?
Pretty close, yeah. Yep. Hey, Tim, can I just ask you a question? Sorry, Roger, just jumping in there about that secrecy. I know Parliament has a lot of these friends of netball and friends of whatever. Is there a friends of video games or something like that?
I don't believe so. That's a really sort of leading question. It's a great invitation for me to kick one off.
Oh, you can pick that up, did you?
I'm up for it. I think part of the problem, though, is that it's like a bad time to launch these friends groups because you can't get people into the building.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe it's a hot scoop, but it's certainly on my to-do list when we can convene meetings in Parliament again. I mean, it would be interesting. Maybe we could kick one off on a Twitch stream. There's a certain number of MPs you need to get there, so maybe we get it in 10 MPs on a Twitch stream. Maybe that ought to be able to count under the rules.
Yeah, mate, there's 160 people watching you talk now that we're not in the same location, so that works.
Might be too much innovation. It might scare off some of the Conservative MPs.
It makes total sense just to have an online friendship group.
Yeah, all right. Add it to the to-do list.
Consider it done.
So in terms of shifting perception then, because I think there are challenges around the perception that people have of the games industry, and I think that, some of the things that are quite impressive with regard to creativity, with regard to, the embrace that game developers have for local culture, for local language, various aspects of if you like, being a reflection of the society in which they operate. Those challenges that we have around perception, what's your opinion in terms of how we can, as an industry, shift those beyond, if you like, the lobbying endeavours and efforts that we are kind of part of in terms of your colleagues in Canberra and more broadly with the media? Looking in from the outside as an avid gamer, what would you say that we could do differently that would help us?
It's a good question, and I really want to emphasise that IGEA has done really outstanding work on this for a long period of time. Like, this is not the industry's fault. This is something about the conservative institutional nature of Parliament House that really drives this. I suppose that normalising things means sort of making it sort of touch and feel, right? So when we did the Twitch stream from Parliament House, that was the first time that it happened from Parliament. And that's kind of a weird thing to say because, like when you look at the other industries, like, Parliament House is crawling with, celebrities and, TV stars and movie directors and that all the time. So they're kind of people that you can have a conversation with, and you can talk to a director and you say, oh, you employ thousands of people. Oh, great, and well, that's the impact you had on our community. That's the story that you told with us. I suppose the difficulty with gaming as an industry is that there aren't the individuals that are representative sort of people of the sector, celebrities, if you know what I mean. Now, I think that's slowly changing with the sort of growth of sort of Twitch streaming and, that esports culture, and, you're starting to get individuals that are known as it. So that might be a way that we can change it. I think the reality is that most MPs, probably the way that they most directly engage with gaming is with their kids as well, like as a shared activity. Like I know for from the conversations I've had with a lot of kids, like, you know, that's a way that a lot of dads bond with their kids, you know, particularly the co-op type games. Like, that's why we ended up playing Moving Out, because I play it with my kids, right? It's not a competitive game, it's a cooperative game, you know, so it reduces arguments between the kids. We play the, you know, the Lego games, you know, a lot with the kids, myself, because it's cooperative, and, you know, you got to teach problem solving and team building and persistence and that. So I think kids are another good way of getting in to MPs on that. But that kind of risks again the negative stereotypes, the unrepresentative stereotypes of gaming as being a kids activity, which we know from the stats it really isn't.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at $200 billion globally, you know, an industry that's larger than both film and music combined, you know, I think the days of the perception that games are trivial are long past, I think. You know, I think you make a great point about engaging with your kids. You know, I do. We play Overcooked at home. I'd love to say it's non-competitive, and I'd love to say that there's no dramas, but that's not quite true. Yeah, I'm as bad at giving people direction at Overcooked as in real life, so it never works for me, really. So in terms of Australian games, you talked a little bit about previously enjoying Australian games. What is your perception then of the Australian development community? What do you think of some of the businesses that are out there and some of the achievements that have been made? Particularly, I think, in light of the fact that we're in we're in an environment here where a dollar is a dollar, versus perhaps, you know, looking at Canada, where a dollar actually is 70 cents spent or 65 cents. Got some incredible talent locally. I mean, what's your thought around that?
Yeah, well, the first impression is that like all creative industries, like, we're really good at it as a nation. You know, like, we've got a lot of talent. And you look at the things that people have sort of bootstrapped, like the games that people have put together on just astonishingly small budgets. And it's really mind-blowing, you know, what you can do with very little. It kind of reminds me like the Australian film industry in kind of like the early 70s. You know, like, you have all these, you know, incredible creative talents and just waiting for this sort of funding stream to come and really kick it off. You know, I mean, I went and hung out with the guys that made Untitled Goose Game pre-pandemic at some point. And, you know, it's amazing when you look at the resources that they had in order to make that game. But then sitting down and talking with them, you sort of see how just a tiny bit of government support can have a really big impact, right? Like, I think they got a grant to go to a conference to sort of, you know, to go to a convention to sort of, you know, pitch the product. I think there was a grant they got for porting it from one platform to another as well. And those little government interventions had a really big impact. I suppose the thing that really frustrates me, and I'd be interested in your views on this, Roger, is that, like, it's a really uneven industry at the moment, right? Like, we've got these really successful indie studios, but, you know, there's not the sort of the AAA presence. There's not the kind of you know, the end-to-end scale of the industry. And, you know, I recognize that from my other portfolio I had in cybersecurity, you know, where you need a depth of and diversity of employers in the sector, so that people can get experience at all levels, right? So you can get experience running projects, running teams, you know, managing large budgets, reporting up to boards, you know, the whole gamut. Whereas at the moment, it kind of feels like if you want that experience, you've got to leave Australia, which is, you know, the last thing that we want as politicians. So, I mean, what do you reckon, Roger? How can we sort of, you know, get more balance in there?
I think you're right. I think, you know, there are some AAA studios here at the moment. And, you know, when you look at, you know, Fire Monkeys, when you look at Sledgehammer, when you look at Wargaming, you know, you've got some AAA studios that operate on a global scale locally here. And given the kind of competitive environment that there is with other jurisdictions who are offering tax offsets, that's a hell of an achievement when you think about it. You know, but overall, with, you know, 142 studios locally, you know, we're talking about 3 AAAs. You know, that's not a big count. And I think, you know, coming back to, you know, your point about the creativity in play, it's almost necessity being the mother of invention, if you like, because, you know, we as a as a country are very creative. We are can do, and we look for kind of solutions in a way that perhaps other people don't. So for me, when I think about what's next for the industry, I think, and as disappointed as I am with the budget, you've made the point that IGEA as an organisation has lobbied hard and lobbied very effectively. Ron and the team have worked tirelessly to really put forward this revised impression, if you like, of gaming that needs to sit with Parliament House. We need a tax offset, because right now, when we talk about AAA Studios, part of the challenge is that we've got largely listed international companies with shareholders and boards that, if somebody, for example, someone locally in Australia went to their parent company and said, hey, I'd like to set up a AAA studio. If the cost of doing that in Australia is, $1, but you talk about 73 cents in Canada, or you talk about Poland or Czech Republic, for example, also, low cost environments. We're not a low cost environment. So for us, I think, we're in a space where we have an awful lot of talent, both within the development community working in smaller businesses. We have an awful lot of talent that have moved into adjacent industries using tools like Unity, using tools like Unreal, can't get jobs in gaming. We've got more than 3,000 graduates a year coming into the job market with game-related qualifications that can't get jobs in the industry. We're in a space where we've got expats who left, to your point, to grow their careers, particularly after the GFC. We've got some Australians working overseas now who are incredibly senior within organisations, who are now perhaps in relationships or married with kids, would love to come home, but can't because the roles are not there. And my personal opinion is that as we, continue to push for a tax offset, if that were to come to fruition, I think we'd be in a position where there would be a number of overseas parent companies of local businesses here that would look at Australia very favourably, simply because of, and I come back to it, the kind of creativity and the, if you like, the solution-oriented nature of teams locally. They've been through that challenge of not having a tax offset, potentially having a little bit of funding from state government, wherever it happens to be, but have had to be creative and have had to really work hard to deliver some incredible games. Look at the Five Lives guys in Brisbane with Windbound. Amazing. There are too many to name, and I don't want to, there's so many great games out there coming out of the community here, and it would be great to get back to a point at which we have a AAA business locally, because, we can't continue to dig stuff out of the ground. Primary exports are not our solution. The value add, the forward-looking, technology-driven jobs that build an ecosystem and build a weight of experience, they're critical for us, I think.
Yeah, and it's particularly an industry where there are spillovers that you get those skills, you can branch out in all kinds of other different directions. I mean, I can speak from personal experience there, and that my father's partner of 20 plus years was a game developer in the US when she moved out here. And she was able to find a career in a whole kind of different streams with those skills, because they are transferable. I mean, I hear what you say about the tax incentive issue, and here's where I sort of say, we haven't announced our policies for the next election yet, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the party, etc. I really hear that argument. I understand it. I know that's an argument that that's the Senate committee that was looking at this issue recently, a cross-party committee, was persuaded by. And it really reminded me of, I've sat on one of those committees before, and this was an inquiry into the film and television industry, and sitting down with an international movie studio executive, and they literally had the spreadsheet. They're just like, look, this is how we make decisions about where to, base film production. And there's the bit of the spreadsheet that says what's the tax offset. So it doesn't surprise me at all to hear that would be the way that studios operate in making those decisions. And you only have to look at the growth of the industry in Canada after they made that decision to see that this is a real cause and effect. Where we are at the moment in a generational recession, where the first, second, and third priority, certainly on my side of politics, I assume on the other side of politics as well, is jobs, job creation, industry creation for high value, quality jobs. Seems like a no-brainer to me, really.
I tend to agree with you, and I think cards on the table. My background is Warner Brothers, so I've been fully ensconced in that kind of support for the film and TV industry, and part of the difference that I think is really, from the point of view of somebody who's worked in both, is really apparent, is that in a lot of cases, not always, but in a lot of cases, labour associated with film production and TV production is itinerant, flies in, runs a project, leaves again. And, from the point of view of GST, from the point of view of payroll tax, it makes no difference. But it makes a big difference from the point of view of building that expertise, building that kind of ecosystem, if you like, that pulls in other companies, that pulls in and is attractive to
post-production and all of that. Yeah.
And to your point, adjacent industries. I think the other thing, when we talk about AAA and we talk about the tax offset, one of the things that it's important to remember as well is the tax offset would not simply be for AAA. There are a number of companies out there, League of Geeks, Mighty Kingdom, who are doing amazing work. And a tax offset for them at a federal level would be an incredible boost, to be as successful as they are without, so we're not necessarily only talking about, overseas AAA investment within the country. We're talking about supporting existing businesses, growing smaller businesses, and building on the talent and the achievements that we've got locally within the market. And I think that's something that sometimes, certainly me anyway, when I talk about the big picture scenario, I don't necessarily cover off enough when I talk to politicians or I talk to advisors. One of the things that it's important to remember is this is also about the existing infrastructure and building on it and building around people who have achieved already without that support, which is really, I think it's really important to remember that. This is not a situation in which we find ourselves with an untalented industry with no achievement. Far from it. What we're talking about here is building.
Yeah, and I view my job as, I view myself as a cheerleader for the industry in Parliament, like an advocate for it. So, telling those stories and getting that in front of people is really, something that's a big priority for me. And in that respect, I should plug that, before COVID hit, we were advanced in planning a creative industries summit. Anthony Albanese was very keen on, really framing creative industries as an employment work, job creation agenda. And to that end, we were going to have a big summit for creative industries. They got canned because of COVID, but it's coming back. And I'm driving my colleagues crazy, banging the desk, saying that the video game industry needs to be a big part of that summit. And, that's really a forum that I'm hopeful that we can, create a platform for people to make that case to help me to convince the colleagues about the importance of this. I can see some questions coming in the Q&A. Run through that.
Yeah, can I just jump in a bit? So there's obviously lots of agreement around an offset and how important a AAA is, and talking about the whole ecosystem. But I guess there's a group of the ecosystem that are never going to be able to take advantage of a tax offset, and for lots of reasons. What about that group? We haven't kind of touched on the interactive game fund that disappeared, that certainly served different purpose as an just as important, but a different sort of part of the market. Any thoughts?
Well, as I was saying before, Ron, like I've heard from, we have sort of a natural experiment in this respect, given that a number of the state film and screen agencies don't draw this distinction between film and games, so sort of treats them on a more equal footing. And we see that those grants funds, helping getting to conventions, porting games, developing a new project, that seed capital, particularly in smaller agencies, can have like a really big impact. But it's broader than that as well. You talk to people in the sector, because particularly for the sort of the indies, the really small studios, a lot of these projects are sort of being done in the bedroom as a sort of a second project, a side hustle type thing. And I've heard from a lot of people that something as sort of fundamental as the rate of job seeker, really matters to the viability of the industry. I've spoken to a number of developers who were developing their project while on the predecessors for job seeker, and talking about how hard that was to actually stay alive, like no exaggeration, while doing that. I should say to anyone listening who's in that situation, there are ways to get around the mutual obligation requirements that attach to job seeker if what you are doing is part of a sole trader business, or is part of helping you to develop your business. So if you're in that situation, reach out to your local MP, because often I find that Centrelink's not aware of those exceptions. But something like that really matters, I think, to the sustainability industry as well. Again, at that sort of foundational level, education really matters as well, right? So access to university, to a quality pipeline of people coming through high schools and into university with the skills that you need in this sector also really matters. And oftentimes those are skills that aren't kind of readily identified as sort of hard STEM skills, as quant skills, like, again, I sort of go back to the Untitled Goose Guys games, like, there are high art students, that we need to value these things as part of the ecosystem in Australia, I think.
Ralph asked a question about, how do we get politicians to visit the studios?
Send me an email. I'll be there tomorrow.
Yeah, and
I love coming to visit.
I was going to say it. We haven't found that it's actually that difficult. That if you reach out to your local, your local member, and say, listen, I'm in your one of your constituents, I've got this business, come have a look at it. It's certainly the first best start of doing that. And yeah, as Ralph said, invite them to events, invite them to launches. It's what we do every time we meet a politician, we invite them to meet their local game developers if we can.
I saw there's a question as well about what the government's response was to the Senate inquiry recommendations. They've already rejected it. There wasn't much substantive in their response as to why, but it didn't go far. But we've really got to back in. Like, so Senator James McGrath was the bloke who spoke on this. I don't think there is a single issue other than games that I probably agree with him on. He's mad as a cut snake, and I think he would view that as a badge of honour, me saying that. But he's put his neck out there to back the industry, and so people ought to support him in that. I reckon. Write him a letter saying well done. Make sure that people notice that it's recognised that he's done that. And he's spoken to the chamber about it as well. I've spoken to the chamber about it too. Ron, I haven't given you a honk in the Hansard yet, but I'll get there once.
Excellent. No, and like you said, when he stood up in Parliament and talked about games, that was on the back of a visit to Game Loft in Queensland.
There you go.
And let's not forget Game Loft. That's just one of the 4 AAA studios. So we forgot to mention Queensland, but that was on the back of being invited to a studio to have a look around, and it really opened his eyes. So we can't underestimate how important that is for all of us collectively to start educating politicians.
I could see how does the pandemic lockdown shift the view of the industry? I mean, look, speaking as someone from Melbourne who has been in lockdown for, God, I can't even count the weeks now, and particularly doing remote learning for that period, I would not have survived that period without my consoles, without Minecraft for my son and Animal Crossing for my daughter. My capacity to do my day job as an MP would have been massively hindered, and I'm sure there are other MPs who've had that experience. I haven't spoken to them. I should ask Claire O'Neill about it, see whether she's on board as well. She's a keen gamer as well. Her tastes go a bit more to the violent than mine in games.
And she's better at moving out, isn't she?
She's much better. I can tell you, for any other MPs who are thinking about doing a Twitch stream, can I just tell you that the load on the executive function in the brain of playing a game, trying to answer questions in a Q&A, while also trying to be remotely like a politician, not just like stream of consciousness, like actually thinking about what you're saying as you go. We were both exhausted after that stream. We looked at each other and was like, that was really hard work. I don't know how those streamers do it. Like, that's hard.
No, that's just a normal day for a game dev. I don't know what I don't know what you're talking about. No, I couldn't do it. Gum at the same time, but yeah.
There's a question about whether the perception issue is only on one side of the house, and Simon was really good. And hello to the Big Ant Studios guys. Yeah, Simon was awesome. He really got it, and he was interesting because he was an example of getting it at a different generation in politics. I guess my observation is that often it's more of a generational thing than a side of the parliament type thing. Maybe I'm trying to be generous to the other side because the way to get change in this industry is to get buy-in across the parliament. But yeah, particularly if you talk to younger MPs, who like me have just grown up with it their whole life. It's not like a different thing at all. There was a thread on Twitter recently of, one of those Twitter memes where you sort of tag 5 mates and say 5 games that had an impact on you. And someone tagged me on it. Actually, a constituent tagged me on it. And so then I tagged 5 MPs and it kicked off. Like, I think there were probably about a dozen Labor MPs jumped on that thread, talking about the games that were really influential on them. And to be fair, they were all sort of MPs of my generation, younger MPs, more newly elected MPs. So that was, it didn't take much effort to get traction there. Oh,
that's not me. I don't think so. Oh, apologies. There we go. The world of tech. You know what? 6 months working remotely, and I still haven't figured out how Teams works. There's no point in me working in technology, let me tell you. And there are many people who would be, I'm sure, in the comments saying that's the case. But anyway, yes.
So I've got another question there saying, do you think the increased frequency of educational games and apps, Duolingo problem-solving games will shift the perceived stereotypes of gaming or take something else? I don't know about educational games, but I definitely think that the ubiquity of smartphones has had an impact. Like now, you can be a gamer without having, a piece of kit sort of symbolizing that. So I think, I used to spend a lot of time sitting on planes with MPs and, you would look over their shoulder and there are heaps of MPs playing apps-based games because we used to spend half of our life on planes and in flights. So I think absolutely that changes it. And when you realize that a lot of those games are being developed in Australia, like world-beating games are being developed in Australia, that has a real impact on changing perceptions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
I'm busy making sure it's muted and trying to make sure that people are not kind of going, yeah, this guy doesn't know technology. But I think we're good now.
This is the benefit of being an MP, mate. Like, the bar is set so low for me that, basically if I can unlock a phone, I'm a geek.
And that's just by looking at it, right? Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of, you've travelled a lot internationally. You've seen, what's happening in terms of Australia on the international stage. How do you think we are? How do you think we sit on the international stage? We've talked a bit about the creativity. We've talked about where we sit, as an industry and the kind of games that we deliver. How do you perceive us in that kind of global space?
It's funny, it's a bit of a dual-edged sword, this, right? So, I try to get across to the West Coast and US as much as possible, and both in my roles in cybersecurity and in comms more broadly. And it's kind of it's both the best experience and the worst experience. You go into these internationally significant companies, and there are always Aussies there, like always. In whether they're startups or whether they're established major companies. And on the one hand, you're proud and like, this is awesome, and like any Aussie overseas, it's just nice to hear another Australian accent. You sort of gravitate towards each other, straight away. But on the other hand, it's kind of frustrating, because all of these Aussies succeeding doing these great things overseas, you want to sort of create more opportunities for that to happen in Australia. So I think our creativity, our capability, our skills are really well regarded, in the biggest companies. As an industry, I don't know. I mean, you think about the amount of branding that we do for the Australian film industry internationally. It's a whole of nation effort, and you've got, you get AUSA and all of this. It's like you've got the Kate Blanchetts and the Hugh Jackmans sort of out in front. I kind of don't get the feeling that we have that same sort of whole of nation effort to say, hey, this is something we're really good at. We should be known for this. And that stems back, to the original problem that we were discussing about just a lack of overall government strategy and commitment to the industry.
Yeah, I guess one of the positives that we came out of this week, Tim, is that we had a similar panel with all the screen agencies together, except one. And the kind of the takeaway from it was, how did they collectively come together for like a brand Australia, focus. So certainly the takeaway we've had and the commitment, so we pre-recorded that a week and a half ago. The commitment we got from every single screen agency is, yep, let's lock in the next meeting to start talking about how we look at that, brand Australia, or that collective pushing of games, which was really encouraging. And I guess because those agencies are, an arm's length away from their governments, is helpful. But also, it's each of those states and territories represent different sides of politics as well. So, hopefully that's going to be a positive move for the industry.
Yeah, I think part of the challenge we have is replicating the reputation we have within the industry globally, and taking it outside of the industry, if you like, to external decision makers, stakeholders, whether it's locally or internationally with other businesses, whether, it's angel investment from the US. I see Giselle with a question about angel investment. Part of it is, I think getting the message out there about how successful the industry is, and quite the way in which it is regarded internally. When you look at E3, when you look at Gamescom, when you look at the way in which, Australia is represented within gaming and within the kind of broader community and commercial community, if we could replicate that externally with stakeholders and just more generally out in the world, I think it would go a long way towards taking us where we need to be. That's one of the challenges, certainly.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of evangelists for the industry in Australia. Like, people are passionate about it. Willing to tell the story. What's sort of lacking is the coordinated sort of branding push, right? To sort of put it on the radar internationally. Like, this is what we're about. This is the way we do it. And it's difficult to do that without government leadership.
I think that's true. The Hugh Jackman of games, as you point out, isn't around at the moment. Ron has put his hand up for the role, but I'm not sure we're there yet, Ron.
You don't think?
Better than me, but I tell you, really.
I think I've seen you and Aaron Williams.
I think more as a Hemsworth type than a Jackman type.
I can see that. Yeah.
That's probably, we should probably move on from that.
Indeed.
Before the comments, we have to start banning people from the comments. Yeah.
Is there something bad? Let me see. Okay.
Not yet. But
Fair enough. What other questions have we got?
State agencies.
Just my staff giving me shit. So my questions at the moment.
Yeah, how to get federal level stakeholders to drink the Kool-Aid. I mean, look, it's something that I think about a lot. It's almost like that the states are sort of hungrier for it, and that can be damaging at times. You can get competition between states. And I've worked for state governments before, and sometimes it can be sort of a negative competition between them. But yeah, I just, particularly in the bureaucracy, you just don't get any sense of urgency or engagement with the importance of this industry federally, and it, inevitably that flows down from ministerial priorities and leadership priorities. But yeah, why the Libs don't get this? I mean, someone like Dave Sharma, ought to be all over this industry. I don't know, maybe he is, Ron, but I mean, like, people like that are the kind of ones that I think that you need knocking on Josh Frydenberg's door saying, we're leaving $50 notes on the ground here, mate. Like, what are we doing?
So we need everyone with their local federal member is from the coalition needs to start inviting them to their studios.
Particularly if you've got a younger local member, like, member for Brisbane's Evans, someone like that, put your foot in the front door. Just say, like, why aren't you backing us in?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I mean, for anyone who wants to do that, and not quite sure how to have that conversation, a bit of a plug for the IGEA team, but there's always a member of the IGEA team that's happy to provide the cheat notes and the background and just, I guess, give a bit of direction if that's needed to have that conversation.
Yeah, you don't have to do it in a partisan way or anything like that. Like, I think this makes sense on so many levels that it can be an easy conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a couple of minutes left. Roger, is there any other probing questions you had for Tim?
I just think, actually not a question, just more an observation. I mean, firstly, thank you, A, for your candour, and B, just for being a gamer. And kind of being one of us, if you like. It is refreshing. Generally speaking, when we have these conversations with politicians, in the hour-long meeting, the first half an hour is, this is the industry, this is the scale, this is what it means, this is who we are as a community, and this is, what we deliver. And then the last 10 minutes is usually, we'll get back to you, thanks very much. And you maybe get 10 minutes of dialogue. So it's just super refreshing to have a conversation on this kind of level. So thank you for being engaged, and thanks so much for that. And look, I think what we also need to do is potentially think about, I'm not quite sure whether things have changed since I was in the home ent industry, but I remember at one point, one of the AGs, a older gentleman whose name doesn't matter, but one of the AGs, we had a conversation. He was living in Canberra in an apartment, and we were talking about Blu-ray and DVD. And he said, Blu-ray, what's that? I watch Yes Minister on VHS cassettes. So we put together a pack for him with a DVD or Blu-ray player and some product, and sent it over to kind of deliver a bit of a view of kind of, well, it wasn't the future at that point. It was, 5 years previously, but
a blinding insight to the present day.
Absolutely. I wonder if we need to get some stuff in the lobby at Parliament House where people can come in and play games. It's
well, when we get the friends group up, I'll bring the consoles along and we'll get playing. That's the easiest way to do it. I mean, how does anyone get into gaming, right? Like, you play.
Yeah.
Is it probably it's
absolutely.
not more complicated.
Picking up a controller and going, oh, actually, this is fun. That's it.
True. Well, look, we've pretty much hit our time limit. Tim, mate, on behalf of all of us, thank you so much. You've always been that guy who we can just reach out to at any time and have a candid.
I'm always that guy, mate.
So we're really appreciative. So thank you for today. You know, there's been great engagement. I'm sure we're going to keep engaging. League of Geeks, you're going to have to get out to the arcade because there's an invitation from the League of Geeks for you. There's a whole stack of people there who want to see you.
As soon as restrictions are finished, man, it's been on the list for so long.
Perfect. Well, Tim, I know you're in quarantine. You have nothing to do tonight, so don't forget to watch the Agders, 7 o'clock.
I've already seen Ben as with costume. His suit. So,
and you can confirm that that's how Ben turns up to Parliament House in his Monopoly.
It's Schmick.
Yep,
it's Schmick.
Schmick. All right. So thanks to the audience. Roger, thank you for your contribution, and Tim, thanks very much.
Thank you, Ron. Thanks, Tim.
Pleasure, guys.
See you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And then we get the countdown as we slowly zoom out.